Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where the country's longest government shutdown is running into this week's election results, leaving both parties and the president recalibrating their path forward as consequences mount for Americans across the country. Air travel set to become the latest area affected, with the FAA announcing it will reduce flights across 40 major airports beginning tomorrow to deal with staffing shortages among air traffic controllers who are working without pay and to maintain safety. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy saying even once the government reopens, those cuts could linger.
It's going to take us some time to staff back up. We're going to start to reduce that 10%, maybe to 5, maybe to 4, until we can get back to normal travel.
Republicans on Capitol Hill using the announcement to hammer their Democratic colleagues over the ongoing shutdown.
Yeah, I mean, what do you expect when we have air traffic controllers not showing up to work because they're not getting paid? You can't blame them for not working.
I feel bad for the air traffic controllers. I feel bad for the TSA agents. I feel bad for everybody who's not getting paid. Whether or not it adds more pressure, probably.
We need to open the government because it's doing enormous damage to the American people.
The impact this will have will be immense. And all of it because Democrats cannot bring themselves to accept a clean, nonpartisan funding resolution.
But some Senate Democrats are signaling they feel their shutdown strategy was vindicated by Tuesday night's election sweep. On the Senate floor, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying it's time for Republicans to back down, tying voters' top issues on election night, the economy and affordability, to Democrats' demands on health care.
Americans plagued by high costs fired a political torpedo this week at Donald Trump and Republicans. They spoke loudly and clearly. We are fed up with the high cost of living. We're fed up with the tax on health care. We're fed up with your broken promises. If Republicans were smart, they would get the message after Tuesday that their do-nothing strategy isn't working. If Donald Trump really wants to get serious about affordability, here's a free tip. He should work with Democrats to actually make health care more affordable.
President Trump appearing to recognize the potency of the issue as he also pivots his messaging towards affordability. Today, announcing a deal to lower the cost of those popular weight loss drugs and dismissing the idea that Democrats are stronger on the issue of affordability, even blaming his own party's messaging around the issue.
I was angry last night with the Republicans. They said, you don't talk about this stuff. Nobody talks about it. We are the affordability one. We are the ones that have done a great job on affordability, not the Democrats. And yet, we just lost a couple of elections, very Democrat areas, but we just lost an election, they said, based on affordability. It's a con job by the Democrats.
It comes as heading into this week's elections, our NBC News poll found more than 2/3 of Americans said the president has fallen short of their expectations on economic issues. Joining me now is senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, and on Capitol Hill is senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor. Thanks to both of you for being here. So, Gabe, let me start with you on this pivot by the president to affordability. What exactly is he saying? What's the new strategy?
Well, Kristen, you just heard him right there saying, that he's angry that Republicans did not stress this more in the lead up to Tuesday's elections. But he's also trying to deflect some of the responsibility for this. I mean, yesterday we were in Miami as he was giving that speech at that business forum. We really started to notice him using that word affordability more and more. And even today, once again, as you said, announcing that drop in prices for those weight loss and diabetes drugs that should kick into effect next year. But the president is trying to make the case, as you heard him say, that this is something that Republicans should be talking about, that Democrats shouldn't gain control of this issue, Kristen.
And Gabe, talk a little bit about the announcement today, the president announcing a deal to lower the price of those popular weight loss drugs. Is that a part of this broader strategy and messaging on the economy?
Yeah, certainly. And look, that this is something that he had telegraphed before, that is part of the most favored nation effort to bring U.S. drug prices in line with other countries. The president now saying that for the lowest doses of some of these weight loss and diabetes drugs, that Americans will be able to get them through Trump RX, that website, that they will be able to get it about $150 to $350 a month. That is a significant decline, Kristen, from what those drugs cost now, more than $1,000 a month. And the administration is trying to make the case that that is something that they are trying to make more affordable for Americans. Now, the problem is, in terms of some other respects, when it comes to gas and groceries, yes, gas is down. Some grocery prices are down, but some grocery staples like beef, bacon, orange juice, that has been rising. So while the White House is trying to make the case that President Trump did campaign on affordability and has made some inroads in that, he runs the risk of running into what President Biden ran into during that presidential campaign, trying to make the case that there has been improvement in the economy, but many Americans aren't feeling it right now. And so we do expect the president and the White House overall could try and make that case more forcefully ahead of the midterms next year, Chris.
Yeah, an important point to highlight there, Gabe. I have to ask you before I let you go, there was a really scary moment at the Oval Office today.
Right.
One of the attendees actually fainted. Is the person, we're looking at some of the video now, is that gentleman okay? What happened, Gabe?
Yeah, certainly a very scary moment there. And Dr. Oz rushed in along with the White House medical team. From what we understand, there was a guest who was in the Oval Office, has not been publicly identified by the White House. But as we understand it, as the president said, and another person told us, the man is expected to be okay. It was just a very scary situation. They had to end or postpone the event briefly while he was tended to by medical personnel, and then that event got started once again, Kristen.
Well, good to hear that he will be okay. Sorry to see that happen, Gabe. Thank you so much. Sahil, let me turn to you. I have to ask you the same question I ask you every single day. Are lawmakers getting any closer to a deal? What's your sense of negotiations right now, Sahil?
The vibes have improved a little bit, Kristen, but this all still hangs in a state of deep uncertainty. Here's what we do know. Senate Republican leadership has told their members there will be a vote tomorrow on something. They don't know exactly what it is, but the expectation is it will be a package of appropriations bills, full-year funding bills for specific parts of the government, probably attached to a continuing resolution as a way to open the government. Now, what they need is 5 more Democratic senators to vote for that in order to get to 60 and break a filibuster. There are some signs of hope that they could get there. We spoke to Senator Gary Peters, who's an appropriator. He's from Michigan. He said he's feeling optimistic that sometime by this weekend that they could get there to a deal. There are others like Senator Jeanne Shaheen about this, very critical of Republicans. She's been quiet lately, would not talk about what's going on. And sometimes when senators go quiet, it tells you that there's meaningful conversations happening behind the scenes. There is also some frustration among Republicans like Senator John Kennedy, who said there's not been much communication about what this is going to be. I spoke to him about an hour ago. He called this a goat rodeo 3 times. He said what they're negotiating, I'm just quoting him here, looks like roadkill that his beagle Roger used to hide under his back porch. So that is why I say there's a caveat here. We don't know just how good the vibes are, but suffice it to say, the pressure is piling on. And one other thing, Kristen, Democrats are demanding, as part of this appropriations deal, a reversal of the RIFs, the reduction in force, in other words, the federal layoffs that the Trump administration imposed in the midst of the shutdown. Unclear that they're going to get that.
Well, Senator Kennedy always has the best quotes. I think we can all agree on that. Let me get you to talk about the future, what we're anticipating, Sahil, in these coming days. Do you expect that senators are going to stick around and work on trying to get a deal this weekend? Do you get that sense that it's that urgent?
There are indications of this, Kristen. I think as long as they feel they're making progress toward a deal, they're not going to want to halt that by sending members home and restarting it on Monday, because you never know what can happen when members go home, hear from their constituents, do some local interviews and whatnot. So if this progress continues, I do expect them to stick around this weekend, and there have been indications of that, especially with, the threats of closing off airspace and Thanksgiving coming up. I think the pressure is simply growing by the day on senators.
There's no doubt about that. Sahil, the president has been very firm. He thinks that Republicans should get rid of the filibuster. Leader John Thune, as you and I discussed yesterday, has said that they're just not the votes for that. What is your sense, though, with each passing day as this goes unresolved? Is there any sense that the president could start to peel off some senators and actually get some support for that?
Well, he is. I mean, the president is already peeling off some Republican senators in terms of his demands to abolish the filibuster, but not nearly enough. I think there's widespread and deep commitment among Republican senators not to abolish the filibuster because they are just too worried that it's going to backfire spectacularly on them the next time Democrats come to power. And, there's some names I can list that the President Trump has convinced, people like Jim Banks, Tommy Tuberville, but not nearly enough. One other thing to note, Kristen, is the uncertainty of all of this. ACA subsidies, it's something that Democrats have demanded. They're not getting it. John Thune and Mike Johnson, the top two Republican leaders, are not guaranteeing where this goes. They're only saying, at least Thune is only saying, that he can promise a vote. Let's play some sound of what Thune and Johnson have said about the ACA subsidies question.
I've made this very clear to them. I can't guarantee them an outcome. I can guarantee them a process. And they can litigate the issue, get the vote on the floor. Presumably they have some way of getting a vote in the House at some point, but I can't speak for the House.
I'm not part of the negotiation. The House did its job on September 19th. I'm not promising anybody anything. I'm going to let this process play out.
And that continues to be a big sticking point, Kristen, uncertain whether they're ultimately going to get the votes, in part for that exact reason.
All right. Well, Sahil, I know you'll continue to watch all of the twists and turns. Thank you so much for starting us off. We do have a bit of breaking news to tell you about before we turn to our next guest. A judge has just ordered the Trump administration to find the money to fully fund SNAP benefits for November by tomorrow. So the administration had previously told the court they would make partial payments for the month. Joining me now is Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Congresswoman Dingell, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. It's always great to have you.
It's great to be with you.
Let me start off by getting your reaction to that judge ruling that the Trump administration has to fully fund SNAP benefits.
It's what they should be doing. We have a contingency fund that has been set up for this. We have children, seniors, veterans that are going hungry, are scared. They don't know how they're going to eat. And I think the Republicans made a terrible mistake on this, quite frankly. They're showing the cruel side of them, that they are willing to play politics with hunger in this country. And we're talking about food that's going to the disabled, that's going to veterans, to parents that are working 2 or 3 jobs and below the poverty line. So, by the way, a judge's order doesn't mean we know in this Trump administration, we don't know what that means. But I hope that they are going to fully fund this program and start getting the money to the states, because people are struggling in many different ways in communities, through their churches, through the nonprofits, through food banks, to help people right now. But this is one of the basic services of government that we should be providing.
Congresswoman, let me ask you about the impact of the election results this week. Leader Chuck Schumer effectively saying that his take is that voters agree with Democrats' strategy, that they should be fighting for an increase to these health care subsidies. What do you think the message was from the races and the votes this week that we saw?
Look, it's very clear to me what the issue was on Tuesday, because from New York to Virginia and New Jersey, the two governor women candidates, now governor-elects, were all talking about affordability, just as Mandavi was in New York. And they are moderate. We're moderate House members, will be moderate governors, but people are hurting. Kristen, I go to the grocery store. People know this, that I'm there every Sunday morning at Kroger. They're walking up to me and showing me what the cost of their food is. When the president starts talking about affordability today, it's the tariffs. Look, I'm someone who thinks tariffs are a tool in the toolbox. We got to compete with China on a level playing field. But the chaotic way in which tariffs have been imposed, the lack of stability, has raised the cost of everything as we're going into the holiday season. People are hurting. They can't afford things. And health care is another part of the discussion about affordability. We are hearing from person upon person who cannot afford health care next year. It's going to go without it. And even it's great that he's lowering the price of a couple of drugs today, but that's not going to reduce the cost of health care or most of the prescriptions that people are getting. And he says he wants to reduce the price of prescriptions. We should be working together. By the way, Republicans should come back to Washington. They've been gone for 6 weeks. How are you going to reach a bipartisan agreement in the House without being there? The message of Tuesday was affordability, affordability, affordability.
Well, let me follow up with you, because the counter is, could Democrats not effectively declare victory and say, look, we won all of those races. We won on our messaging. We are going to reopen the government because so many people are suffering right now. And then we will negotiate over these health care costs. What say you about that argument, Congresswoman?
First of all, I know I should, but it's not who I am. I talk like it is. So I'm glad we won on Thursday and saw those. But we need specific actions that are going to address what the people that we represent are worried about. And we need to find a way that we're going to address health care for next year. And the fact of the matter is, Republicans know they have a problem now because the exchange is open and people are getting their premium costs, and they are rising in record amounts that people have not seen. By the way, already impacted by the big blank bill we passed earlier this year. I think we've got to find a way that they're going to be willing to come to the table and talk about all these issues. And at some point, we had to draw a line and say, work with us. We got to address these issues. And that's what we're asking. So I say, come back to Washington. Let's work together to get the government open, but also address the issues.
Very quickly, because I want to get to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's announcement today. Do you think that they're any closer to a deal, negotiators?
I know that the Senate is talking. As you heard, some of the senators on both sides are expressing frustration that they don't know what they're talking about. I think it's very important that affordability be addressed in this, that the cost of health care, we've got to figure out how we are going to address that. I think we got to get this government reopened because a lot of people are hurting, and I just hope we could all get to a table and be talking about figuring out how to get this done.
All right. I do want to turn to the news from Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi today. She, of course, announced that she will retire at the end of her term. What does this significant changing of the guard mean for your party, do you think, Congresswoman?
Well, first of all, she's an incredible woman. She is strong. She's tough. She shattered the glass ceiling for all of us. She was someone that you could, I had some moments with her, but she also was a great mentor. And I think that we want to learn from all that she did, salute her service. And she has been, when she stepped aside and allowed a new generation to move into leadership, but she stayed there mentoring. She is someone that recognizes the table needs to have everybody at it. I think for all of us in the House, an incredible in the day-to-day, but I think we will all benefit from how she led us, the leadership in terms of the policies that she passed. And I still think that she's got another chapter, and she's going to be sharing the wisdom and advice that she has learned along with all of us.
All right. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, thank you so much. And thank you for those personal reflections as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, safety in the skies. The president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association joins us in studio as the FAA moves to dramatically reduce air traffic across the country, with the government shutdown putting enormous strain on the system. Plus, as we mentioned, it's the end of an era. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi announcing she will retire after nearly 4 decades in Congress, capping an historic career and reigniting the debate inside her party about the need for generational change. Stay with us. We've got a lot coming up. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we noted earlier, the government shutdown is now taking its toll on air travel, with the government announcing potential cuts to air traffic at 40 major U.S. airports starting tomorrow. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says the cuts will help alleviate the additional pressure placed on air traffic controllers who continue to work without pay during this shutdown.
There is going to be a 10% reduction in capacity at 40 of our locations. The administrator is going to tell you that this is data-based. This is not based on what airline travels, has more flights out of what location. This is about where is the pressure and how do we alleviate the pressure.
Joining me now is Nick Daniels, president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. That's the union that represents air traffic controllers. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with, I think, one of the big questions on everyone's mind. Is it safe to fly right now, particularly given these scaled back flights that we're going to see starting tomorrow?
It was safe to fly before the shutdown. It's safe to fly during the shutdown, but that's because of the hardworking men and women that are out there contending with this extremely unfair situation. We already had enough fragility in the system. We only have 10,800 certified controllers, where there should be 14,633. 3,800 controllers short. They work 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, only 4 days off in a month, and now they've seen 37 days without pay, all because of a political disagreement that doesn't have anything to do with them.
Well, to that point, air traffic controllers are under an immense amount of stress and strain on an average day. Because this shutdown is now the longest in history, that's only been exacerbated. Does that not get worse with each passing day?
Yeah, it absolutely does. This is one of the most high-stress, high-consequence jobs in the world. These unsung heroes, American patriots, that still choose to go in and ensure and protect the American flying public every single day, but knowing that their mental health, the stress, the pressure, it leads to fatigue. We have to be 100% of the time. And when you're now worried about putting gas in your car, about paying for childcare, we saw a controller today that was training, get evicted out of their apartment. And other controllers that aren't making any pay are the ones rallying around him to ensure that he has a place to live.
It's horrifying to hear about that. Given the scenarios that you are describing, at what point does safety become a concern when you're talking about this extreme fatigue and just the human toll that it's taking on people?
Well, this is what you're seeing. We continue the increased risk in a system. That is our job, is to ensure that risk doesn't get too high. If we put an aircraft in front of another aircraft, if it's faster, slower, we climb one or descend one, we're looking at the risk involved associated with that. Well, what we've been calling out for 37 days is the amount of risk this is going to bring in the system when air traffic controllers aren't focused on their primary duty. They're focused on, do I need to get a second job, or am I already working 6 days a week? I can't get a second job, or I can't even get a loan because so many of them are being given to federal employees. So as that risk grows, there's only one way you mitigate that. One, or I guess two ways: in the government shutdown and pay the people. The second one is reduce the capacity of the airspace, so that way there's less aircraft and we can ensure their safety.
So do you welcome this decision by Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy?
I think anything in the name of ensuring safety. If Secretary Duffy and Administrator Bedford believes that this is going to help increase safety, then absolutely. But they'll have to monitor it, see what impacts and effects that it's having. But we have to continue working together. We're in uncharted territory. It's not like there's a playbook for not getting paid for 37 days. Real people with real lives having issues, and then saying, run the busiest airspace in the entire world.
I want to play you a little bit more of what Sean Duffy had to say. Get your reaction on the other side.
If you bring us to a week from today, Democrats, you will see mass chaos, you will see mass flight delays, you'll see mass cancellations, and you may see us close certain parts of the airspace because we just cannot manage it because we don't have the air traffic controllers.
Do you agree with that assessment?
I've done this job for 27 years, 5 years in the United States Marine Corps, the rest with the FAA. If we get into the travel season and air traffic controllers still haven't been paid, the other aviation safety professionals, our technicians, we don't know the amount of problems that it's going to bring. There's only so long people can last, and I can promise you this, every American out there knows if you don't pay people, Problems are only going to grow. They're never going to get better.
Yeah. And of course, some people have already resigned. Do you think those resignations are temporary out of frustration, or is it possible that many of them will, in fact, be permanent, that some people are walking away from this job for good?
Right. Air traffic controllers are going through all the range of motion. Some want to fight, scream, shout. You know, they're upset. They don't know where to be upset at. Some are hopeless, seeing the headline every day of there's no end in sight. But with the ones who are resigning said this was the final straw. They're done with this career. They're done with this profession. They're going to move on to something else. And that is just taking us backwards. Something Secretary Duffy and I were already working on was a way to supercharge the hiring of air traffic controllers, not a way to take people away from this amazing profession.
Well, taking it a step further, could it actually dissuade future potential air traffic controllers from signing up for that job?
Not only could it, it already has.
Yeah.
Air traffic controllers at Oklahoma City that are just learning before they get assigned to a facility to become a fully certified air traffic controller. They're hanging up their hat, too. They've started to resign as well. And I can promise you, my son, he's 20, he's a young pilot, and he's talking about, Dad, what's this going to do to the aviation industry? I can tell you that it's not getting better, and every day it continues, it's going to get worse, and it's going to take us months to come out of it.
Well, lawmakers may stay in Washington this weekend to try to hash out a deal. What's your message to them if you could look them in the face and talk to them directly? What would you say to them? 4
words. I've said them for 37 days. End the shutdown now. There is no way that the American air traffic controller, these patriots, should go and be a part and shoved and thrust into the middle of a political discussion that has nothing to do with them. They do not need to be the rope in this tug-of-war game. They are not a political pawn. These government workers, these federal workers, need to get paid for the amazing work that they do.
All right, Nick Daniels, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We really, really appreciate it and your perspective. Coming up next, facing the future, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi announces her retirement after nearly 40 years in Congress. And a second House Democrat announces he's not seeking re-election either, decrying the dysfunction of Congress and the rise of political violence. We'll have the panel weigh in on all of it. Stay with us on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we mentioned, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi announced in a video today she will not seek re-election after an historic career of nearly 40 years in Congress. Here's some of what she said in a message to her constituents in San Francisco.
With a grateful heart, I look forward to my final year of service as your proud representative. As we go forward, my message to the city I love is this: San Francisco, know your power. We have made history, we have made progress, we have always led the way, and now we must continue to do so by remaining full participants in our democracy and fighting for the American ideals we hold dear.
Pelosi made history as the first female Speaker of the House, pushing landmark legislation through the chamber, including the Affordable Care Act during the Obama administration and the Inflation Reduction Act under President Biden. She was featured prominently in many Republican campaigns who used her as a political foil. She also led 2 impeachment efforts against President Trump. Today, Minority Leader Jeffries recognized Pelosi's influence on the party.
Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi will go down in history as the greatest speaker of all time. Her tenure has been iconic, legendary, historic, and transformational. The nation is better off today than the one she found upon her arrival in 1987. It's been an honor and a privilege to be able to serve with her, work with her, be mentored by her, learn from her, and get things done for the American people.
Joining me now is the panel, Daniela Diaz, congressional reporter at Notice, Joel Heidkamp, radio host at KFGO, and Danielle Pletka, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and an NBC News contributor. Thanks to all of you for being here. Daniela, you are fresh off the Hill, where undoubtedly there's a lot of reaction pouring in from this announcement by Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. What are the implications of her decision not to run again?
Well, I want to say it was not that much of a surprise for those of us that have been following her career. I covered her when she was Speaker. I covered when she stepped down from leadership. And now that I covered her announcing that she wasn't going to run for re-election. She has been more and more a more shadow player in Democratic leadership, especially with the shutdown, as we've seen her mentee, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, really step up and be the face of Democratic opposition to the government shutdown. So while it is not a surprise that she announced that she was going to do this, we have to say, she's historic. I mean, she's the first female speaker ever. She has been in Congress for decades. She helped enact 2 Democratic presidents' agendas. She was known to rule, as I'm quoting another journalist, with a Gucci glove. This is who Speaker Pelosi was, and it's going to be, I mean, it's an end of an era.
It really is an end of an era, Joel. How do you see her legacy, and what message does it send to the rest of the party? Could some of her colleagues, her senior colleagues, start to say, time for us to pass the baton?
Well, maybe. In her case, I hope they're out of it. I have 5 granddaughters. I'd like each one of them to turn out just like her. I had a chance to meet her a number of times, and I tell you what, she's tough. She's really tough, and that's probably the thing I respect the most about her. But you know, I think she realizes it is probably time. You know, look at the class way she handled somebody taking a hammer to her husband. I mean, think about that. You know, but there is a time when you pull the pin, and I think she's there.
Danny, President Trump often used Speaker Pelosi as a foil. Today, he didn't have the kindest words for her. He didn't remember her in such glowing terms. But what are the implications, broadly speaking, do you think, not just for Democrats, but for Republicans as well?
It's funny. So, I mean, there are lots of mean things I can say as a conservative about Nancy Pelosi, but and I guess the only one mean thing I would say is, and this is about everybody, is you shouldn't be 85 and retiring. You should be retiring when you're a little bit younger. And you know, we bemoan this, that there's not a new generation in Congress, and that's part of the problem, is people don't want to let go, and she's emblematic of that, even though she wasn't gaga at the end, which some have been. President Biden. And so, you know, what you really need to see is that. But I'll say something a little bit different, which is I think that she represents, even though from San Francisco, she represents a part of the Democratic Party that's gone. She was great on China and human rights, right? She worked with Republicans on these issues. I remember when the Squad started acting up when they were first elected, and she, with an iron fist, or let's say a heavy thumb, squashed them down, kept them in line. She represented a different era in the Democratic Party, and I think all of us are going to miss that era.
That's an interesting point. I mean, speaking of a new era in this party, we learned today that Democratic Congressman Jared Goldman, who represents a district that President Trump won, announced that he's not running for re-election. And he said this. He said, "I don't fear losing. What has become apparent to me is that I now dread the prospect of winning. Simply put, what I could accomplish in this increasingly unproductive Congress pales in comparison to what I could do in that time as a husband, a father, a son." He also talks about, Daniela, the fact that political violence has been on the rise. What are the implications of this decision? Because it could become a Republican seat.
He had one of the swingiest seats in Congress. And I think it's important to note that he was the only Democrat that voted to continue funding the government in the House when that legislation came to a vote. He has always been, I don't want to misuse the word maverick here, but someone who really, depending on the vote, voted with his own conscience, how he saw things happening. He voted with Republicans very often because he came from such a battleground district. Now, this retirement was shocking. He has been in Congress for several terms, and he has made a name for himself for being someone in the Blue Dogs who voted how he wanted to vote. So it's going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening, whoever ends up running in his place as a Democrat, because this is a very red district.
Yeah, Joel, the question when you hear about Golden's decision to retire, I mean, is there still space for someone who can reach across the aisle?
Well, that is a fair question. As somebody who comes from Colin Peterson country, you question whether or not the Blue Dogs have that opportunity. I think that the Republicans are going to look at this because it's a swing area with a lot of opportunity, but they're not going to look at it the same way that they would have before yesterday. I think yesterday they realized that, you know what, they're not as thick as what they thought they are. And the key for Maine is to find that candidate that knows how to make sure the snow is off the street, that knows how to make sure that the water and the sewer run. And if Maine finds that candidate and it's got a D behind their name, the Democrats will hold that seat.
Danny, all this comes as the government shutdown is now the longest in history. And coming off of the heels of Tuesday night's election results, President Trump said effectively that Republicans have to retool their message on the economy. And he wants to end the filibuster. But do you think this applies pressure to both sides, quite frankly, to end this shutdown? Do you think it's going to happen this weekend?
I hope it's going to happen this weekend. Look, again, we come back to Jared Golden retiring is, Blue Dogs are now Blue Dog. There aren't many left. And part of the problem, I think, is that Congress doesn't do very much anymore. And so as a result, we see that the pressure because on the shutdown is not that great because Congress just doesn't feel pressure to act on anything, not to pass bills, not to reach across the aisle, not to do anything. I hope that it ends this weekend. But I have to say, I thought that the president made a huge mistake. President is a lame duck. I hate to say that. Sorry, Donald. But the president is a lame duck. He's not thinking about what the next president's going to be dealing with. If they get rid of the filibuster, the next president isn't going to thank him unless it's a Democrat and they have a Democratic control of the Senate. The Republicans went after him. They said this put pressure on them without putting pressure on the Democrats. Democrats were about to do a deal, and then suddenly Trump came up with this filibuster line, and they decided to retrench. No, that doesn't work. And what Congress needs to do is reassert its authority, figure this out, shut it down, and then start passing bills.
Joel, what about that? The fact that, as Danny points out, they don't feel pressure to do anything because you have fewer moderates, despite the fact that lines are getting longer outside food banks. We just talked about the chaos at airports. I mean, how does this end, and how does this moment in our politics end?
Well, it all ends up being local, right? I mean, okay, look at my case. I'm in Washington, D.C. It's opening deer hunting back home. I got a license, I got to fly home to get there. It matters, for people personally, what's going to happen to them. I think when this thing settles out, it's going to settle out after the Democrats believe that America fully understands what's going to happen to their health care. They're not going to have it solved. They're not going to have it fixed. But you know what? My farmers, my ranchers that rely on the exchange, and they do, they rely on the exchange. They're going to know who's sticking up for them to have the exchange. And that's when it'll get settled.
Daniela, are we any closer? Do you think that this weekend could be the weekend that the government reopens?
I've been covering this since the beginning, and it does feel different this week. I mean, Tuesday night's election had Republicans realizing maybe it's time that we start addressing some of the issues that Republicans voted against, or voters voted against us in Tuesday night's election. And Democrats are saying, it's probably moderate Democrats, to be clear, are saying it's time to address this. We beat a record. It's been more than 35 days. The last shutdown was 35 days. It's a full shutdown, and the pressure is there. As we are here, senators are on Capitol Hill having these discussions. They feel optimistic on both sides that something could come from this, but it remains to be seen what that concrete deal is going to look like.
Yeah, all right. Well, we will watch every twist and turn of it. Thank you for the great conversation. We really appreciate it, Daniela, Joel, and Danielle. Thank you. Coming up after the break, layoffs and tariff uncertainty, the economic signals that are fueling fears of future turmoil. Keep it right here on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. According to a new report from the job placement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas, layoffs soared last month. pushing 2025 job cuts to levels typically seen in recessions. Because of the ongoing government shutdown and a lack of official jobs data, Challenger's latest report is being read more closely than usual. According to the firm, U.S. employers have announced 1.1 million job cuts so far this year. As you can see, this is the biggest reading since 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic and on par with job cuts during the 2008 and 2009 recession. This data includes a series of recent layoffs from giants like UPS, Amazon, Target, and others. Adding to concerns about economic uncertainty, President Trump's sweeping tariffs now appear to be on shaky legal ground. Supreme Court justices on Wednesday appearing skeptical of the administration's arguments. The ruling could have an outsized impact on everything from consumer prices to interest rates. Joining me now is NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Brian, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it. So what are your biggest takeaways from this report, Brian?
Well, Kristen, the big takeaways are that job layoff announcements do appear to be up. And this is something that we've already known. We've been covering over the past few weeks. Those large companies, as you listed on that full screen just before, these large layoffs that are impacting their corporate offices, impacting their fulfillment centers. I mean, you're talking about Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, UPS. These are major employers with tens of thousands in some cases of jobs that they intend to lay off. Now, this report, the Challenger Job Report, basically culls together all of those announcements. So this is not necessarily Challenger doing some sort of survey. They're basically just looking at publicly available press releases and aggregating them all together. But as you mentioned, that eye-popping number, 1.1 million. That's how many job cuts have been announced from January through October. The last time we saw a number that high was in 2020, a year you obviously don't want to be comparing to. But again, this does underscore some of the concerns about the weakness in this jobs market, especially in the absence of official data coming from the government, which we won't get tomorrow, barring any sort of miracle on the shutdown front.
Yeah, there were a couple of caveats that came with this report. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, what we're talking about here is Challenger gathering together intended announcements over job cuts. That means that those people who might be part of those job cuts may not have been immediately laid off. They might not be laid off until months from now, or they might not be laid off at all. A company could decide after the fact that actually, just kidding, we're not going to lay off that particular group or that particular employee. There's another concern here with who's covered. So this is U.S.-based companies that are included in this report, but it might include hiring from abroad. So it could be a U.S.-based company with employees in the UK or another country that they intend to lay off. That's an important caveat to remember when you look at this data as well.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. We always appreciate your insights. Still to come, NBC's Matt Bradley embeds with the IDF inside Gaza as the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal nears the 1-month mark. A former presidential advisor on the Middle East joins me next in studio. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. We are getting a rare look inside the Gaza Strip and the so-called Yellow Line, the area where Israeli troops have withdrawn as part of the ceasefire agreement. Israel's military took journalists into Gaza on the condition that we not show the military facilities or the faces of most military personnel for what the IDF said are security reasons. This is the view from one outpost guarded by Israeli military troops, showing the widespread devastation in the area. NBC News International correspondent Matt Bradley was among the journalists embedded with the IDF. Take a look.
This was the scene of some of the most fiercest fighting of the 2 years of conflict here in the Gaza Strip. Now there's a ceasefire, so all you can really hear are the sounds of drones overhead, but also, as you can see, the area behind me is basically uninhabitable. Now, the Yellow Line, that's the area where the Israelis have withdrawn to as part of the ceasefire deal. It's just off to my right, and this Israeli position polices that Yellow Line. But the Israelis say that Hamas is testing it on a daily basis, sending fighters right up to or trying to breach that Yellow Line, trying to test the ceasefire and trying to test Israeli forces.
That area was also where Hamas said it found the remains of the last Israeli-American hostage, Itay Chen, earlier this week. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced his body was finally returned to Israel. Joining me now is Amos Hochstein, managing partner at TW Global and former advisor to President Biden. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
It's great to be here with you.
Well, it's great to have you here. Let's start off right there with the ceasefire. What do you think the status of the ceasefire is right now? Are you confident it will continue to hold?
Well, it's the Middle East. Never should we be confident of anything. But look, it's the most important time is the first several days and weeks after a ceasefire, when the other side is going to try to challenge it, and there's a lot of tension around it. So far, it's holding, and I think that the fact that the administration in the United States is focused on it and focused on the implementation, holding back the Israelis and threatening the Hamas, I think is a good sign for it to continue. And the fact that the Israelis have announced that they're going to reduce the number of troops and sending troops home is also a sign that they think that this is going to last further.
Well, and of course, the question now becomes about next steps. There are still some bodies that need to be returned, 6. Do you believe that that is going to happen? Because part of what Hamas has said is we're trying to retrieve these bodies. We have to find some of the bodies still. It's a very sensitive matter, and it also stands to potentially derail the ceasefire.
Well, look, Hamas has to do what it committed to do, which is to find the bodies. The last, when I was in the administration, they had a list. They knew where the bodies were buried. That's why they're finding them so quickly after saying that they couldn't find them. And when the pressure mounts, they find them. Look, Hamas is a terrorist organization that hijacked, not only kidnapped live hostages, but also dead bodies. And so they knew where they were. It was always a card that they had to use. What we have to focus on is not just only the tactical of day-to-day, are they going to find the bodies or not, but what happens next. And right now, the only two-state solution we have is the 2 states of Gaza, right? Because Israel is in control of a certain part of Gaza and Hamas is in control of the other. And the negotiations around a foreign force coming in, what does that look like? Hamas is not incentivized to give up its arms. It's not incentivized to get out of the picture. So I think the tension really is around, will Hamas say, well, I don't want to give up power. And that's where I think the real rub meets the road.
Well, and that takes me to the next question. I mean, how does the United States get Hamas to lay down its arms? Because unless that happens, there is no future peace agreement.
Well, I think that's the open question. What Israel wants to say is, like, look, I don't care what foreign forces you come in. It's unlikely any foreign force, whether it's Indonesian or Azerbaijani, is going to get into gun battles with Hamas. So if Hamas doesn't do anything, Israel is saying, I don't care what happens, I will continue to police this. And they want a free hand in continuing to attack Hamas positions and to fire and to airstrikes, regardless of the ceasefire, if it thinks that there is an attack against them. And they will be the one to define that. And that is where I think the hard negotiation is going to have to happen. This ceasefire came across very quickly. Irony to say after 2 years of fighting, but it came around very quickly, and the details weren't there. So they're trying to copy a little bit of the Lebanon model, a little bit of the Syria model, and to Gaza, but I don't think that they have that worked out yet.
Aid groups are saying that there still are not enough aid trucks, food aid trucks, getting into Gaza. That it's more, but it's not at the level that they want to see. What do you think needs to happen in order for the trucks to get to the level that they say is needed?
Look, the experience of the last 2 years has been Israel allows as many trucks and aid as they're forced to. And so you have the administration and international community pressing the Israelis to let them in. They have to continue. The pressure will have to continue. The level of devastation, though, is so critical and so great that there is no right amount, right? The more you put in, the more that's needed. So there's a little bit of a game here of how much is enough, right? It's never going to be enough. There's so much devastation, so much to do to support these people that are there. And there's no governing structure on the other side. Hamas is still in control. So there's also this question of who are you giving aid to? Who are you giving the money to? Who's in control of it? Those are things that are not answered yet.
Yeah, you referenced the ceasefire agreement that you helped to broker between Israel and Lebanon. The IDF said today it carried out strikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Do you view those strikes as undermining the agreement?
I think while we're focused on Gaza, the one that I'm actually the collapse of the ceasefire with Lebanon. That is the one that I think that's the one that people should focus on, because while Israel is not complying with the ceasefire because it did not withdraw its positions, but the government of Lebanon is not doing its job either, which is to force Hezbollah to move to the north of the Litani River. Hezbollah did move north, but now they're starting to come back. The government has to implement that, and there needs to be more attention by the United States and others to the implementation of that fragile peace.
Why is it so potentially damaging to the region if it doesn't hold?
Because anything that happens in Lebanon will have an impact in Syria, with Shara coming here in the next few days. And that will, once again, could have an impact in Gaza. In other words, these things are all interconnected. We can't allow that ceasefire to collapse. And Israel is using a lot of force. Sometimes, I think right now, they're at the point of diminishing returns. You have to put the pressure. There's a new government in Lebanon that is, for the first time, anti-Hezbollah. They want to disarm Hezbollah. They need the support, and we need to give them that support.
With our final 30 seconds left, what will you be watching for when the Syrian president visits the White House the first time?
I mean, we have a former ISIS and al-Qaeda commander coming to the Oval Office. It's extraordinary. He's going to join the anti-ISIS coalition. That's also extraordinary. But we need him to start implementing. We're giving him a meeting in the Oval Office. He needs to to do more to bring the women who were abducted during the events in Sweden. We need to get more out of him.
All right, Amos, thank you so much. Great to have you here. We really appreciate it. And we're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. There's more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.